Welcome again to DisruptEd. In this episode, we have the pleasure of having an old friend, Talib Hashim, and for the lot of people in the UAE, especially the locals, would know him quite well for his efforts when it comes to Emiratization.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here with you, Dr. Adil, and it's always good to catch up with you. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Thank you, buddy. A bit of history, and where are you today?
I've dedicated the past 17 years without giving away my age or looking old.
Yeah, you never age for some reason. Okay, good.
So for the past 17 years, I've dedicated myself towards the mission of empowerment and empowerment of local talent. I'm the managing director and founder of TBH Advisory, also co-founder of a accelerator platform called Sodana and a founder of Mailist.com. But my mission has always been about how can we help young youth shift from unemployment to empowerment. It used to be employment, and now it's about empowerment, whether they choose the path of employment or entrepreneurship, or they just want to be artists, so to speak. So what I've been doing is been working with private sector organizations and government, helping them understand mindset of youth, how to attract them, engage them, employ them, retain them, and grow them to become future leaders. But at the same time, I've been working with a lot of local youth job seekers or employees. So that is, in a nutshell, what I've been doing. At the moment, what keeps me busy is adapting my business to the fast-changing market needs. And I mentioned employment to empowerment. So with TBH, we are now not only a people business, we're a people and business advisory service. So we work a lot with business founders and entrepreneurs looking to access the local market, looking to localize their approach.
So to the best of my understanding, now you're focused on helping locals fit within the workforce, get opportunities, whether as employees or as entrepreneurs. And you also help foreign entities or foreign businesses adapt to the market. Is this what you're doing currently?
Absolutely. I've come from just your regular headhunter. This is what locals know me. They pick up the phone, find me a job or find me a person to headhunt, right? So I was the local headhunter. We set up the first Emirati specialist Emiratization consultancy. At that time, the need of the moment and what we could only see was how can we help people find jobs? It was as simple as that. Whether we were working with organizations in semi-government, whether we were recruiting for the Metro, Dubai Metro, or we were headhunting the next director for innovation for a government entity. It was really about headhunting. But what I realized was the more I was speaking with the private sector, I realized there was a need for two things. One, there was a need for solutions that go beyond just employment and hiring, right? And the other thing, there was a need to understand the local market, local mindset, and subsequently, how the government thinks. Where's the government going? Because it really influences businesses and affects how they do. So I've moved, I think it's an evolution basically, and a journey of adapting from just a headhunter to a person who can now advise organizations on how they can localize their workforce and how they can localize their businesses.
I think your experience in trying to localize has changed in the last decade. I mean, with the introduction of certain programs, I believe, at a point in time, especially within the UAE and probably some surrounding countries, the locals wanted jobs with the government. And I think a lot of that was due to, I would guess, and here where I want to hear from you, I think some of that was linked to the lifestyle that goes with it, inclusive of how the pension programs are structured, and expected skill sets and probably the level of pressure and expectations. So I'd like to hear from you. What was the expectations before when it comes to government jobs, and has that changed as of now from the perspective of government, and also from the perspective of the Emiratis? How did that change, like within the last couple of decades?
Great. So if you're ready for some truth bombs, please.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what we need,
right,
man.
Yeah. So you mentioned something critical from the perspective of government and the perspective of local job seekers. This is a very significant distinction that we need to make. And also there's a perspective from employers, and we'll get into that. But
I want to talk about that just after this.
What do they think, right? Now, until probably 4 years ago, 90% of job seekers wanted to work in the public sector. This is not my opinion or view. This is based on the several reports that have been released, whether it is Mohre, Khalifa Fund. So many reports were released, and all of them were highlighted the fact that the majority of local job seekers continue to want to work in the public sector. Now, why? There's a perception of, as you mentioned, status and lifestyle, right? That is also influenced by family and peer influence.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of the time when I speak with job seekers, and even recently, I was speaking to a job seeker who's desperate to move up in her career. And I got her an opportunity that offered her a better salary and also an opportunity to undergo training and move up in her career. Immediate move up in her career. But I found myself not having a conversation with her. Well, it was with her, but it really was with her husband
and her family,
and her
family.
So I told her, listen, khalas, give me your husband's number. Let me speak with your husband.
Okay.
Or give me your father's number. Let me speak with your father.
Okay.
Right? And there are real concerns there. So any policymaker, when they devise any sort of intervention or legislation, what a lot of time they fail to keep in mind is the indirect influence from society, parents, and family, right? So that is one of the influences. Perception of salary and pay. There are private sector organizations that pay better, but they fail to convince nationals that the pay is better working with them unless there's an offer letter. And then the second thing is the perception of job security. That job security in the private sector is an issue. I remember speaking to a young lady about an opportunity with a company, American multinationals. It's a 150-year-old organization. And she asked me, my father is asking and is worried, if this company shuts down tomorrow, right, how will I guarantee my job? Like, how can I guarantee my job? What will happen then? And isn't it better if I work with XYZ semi-government organization? And I told her, sister, this company is older than the country itself, right? And they have been here for 40, 45 years. So there's a battle of perception and misconception. Now, what you said, I'm not going to repeat what you said, you pretty much summed up the symptoms of what was happening. What is happening at the moment is jobs in the public sector are not as abundant and available as they used to. It took a few years for nationals to understand it and for it to sink in. Because I had conversations with so many nationals, and a lot of them have been out of jobs for 16 months, 2 years, 3 years. And then they get it and they say, Talib, I'm open to work in the private sector now, provided it's a multinational. So it took a few years for nationals to say, right, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone. I'm going to take a risk and work in the private sector. So yes, there is more interest from nationals to work in the private sector. Is there data of what is the percentage of nationals interested to work in the private sector? There isn't yet. I'll be
Okay,
honest.
interesting.
There isn't.
Interesting. That's a question to be asked.
Exactly.
Okay.
The last data I know of is the data that said 90% wants to work in the public sector, at least 90%.
Is this a global phenomenon or regional phenomenon? How common is this?
It's common in certain regions, it's not common in others. In certain regions, certain countries, a job in the public sector is not something to be proud of. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so,
okay.
because when we speak with individuals and people, working in the public sector for us means you're going for retirement. That's it, right? In certain countries, yeah, a job in the public sector is a job that is comfortable, more secure. Not necessarily, the pay is not necessarily great. So it's almost somewhat a global phenomenon. But here, the thing is here, if you look at, sorry to interrupt you, so if you look at, and I wrote my master's degree thesis on Emirati entrepreneurship. And what I tried to do is break down the evolution of the UAE economy. And I broke it down into, which is pre-oil discovery stage and then production stage. And I draw parallels with the production economy of the United States, where the focus was invest in infrastructure, invest in manufacturing, large businesses, mass hiring, very little focus on innovation and technology or entrepreneurship, and mass produced product. So the UAE went through that stage with the discovery of oil, huge injection of money into infrastructure and into civil service. And that's where it comes from. The civil service became the main creator of jobs, And then we moved into the knowledge economy, and then now we're in the precipice of the entrepreneurship or innovation economy, what might you. So the reason why in the Gulf region the public sector is more popular than the private sector is because when oil was discovered, the focus was, let's invest in infrastructure, let's invest in civil service. So a lot of the young locals like me are offsprings. We grew up seeing our parents working in civil service.
Yeah.
We grew up seeing, if you remember, we grew up having lunch with our parents. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and having a nap.
Yes.
And then meeting with friends.
Yes, that's true.
And now you're asking me to work in the private sector in a company that has 1 hour lunch break, and I finish work at 6 p.m. You see that?
Yeah.
So that is where it comes from.
I recall actually, and it still is to a certain degree, I believe, the perfect to-be husband, someone that has a government job, is a very clear route or pathway towards a retirement, and then somehow life starts after retirement. I don't get it, but then I believe that is where it comes from, probably. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but then not having to experiment in life and multi-skill and try different industries. Where did that go?
Be honest, Dr. Adil, we come from the same generation, although I don't know, I might look older than you, but...
I think you are younger than me, okay.
I wanted you to say that, but anyway. But we come from the same generation, we graduated the same year. We were never prepared for that in school, our education system. We're never taught that. Work in multiple sectors, be more risk averse. I don't remember any conversation about being employed in a multinational private sector. I remember the association of graduating and working in civil service, and the connection with national service and patriotism and contributing to your country. I don't remember having any conversation. And okay, that was our time, but today when I speak to high school students or high school graduates, it's the same thing. There's literally no conversation. That conversation is had at home.
I'll actually try to explain the reason why this exists in the education system. I said it a few times before, and allow me to just share that with you. Yeah. So I think much of that is due to the education system today, which is highly focused on producing people that seek employment as a lifestyle option. is linked to a similar story to what has happened in the UAE when it comes to the discovery of oil and the need to build infrastructure and all of that. But in this scenario, it's about humanity. So what happened was, as a species, it took us around 300,000 years to arrive to our first 1 billion, and it was in 1800. And at that period, vaccination was discovered. A boom in human population has happened. And what that needed then is a lot of infrastructure to deal with that huge influx of human population. And with that, there was this huge need for a lot of engineers to build roads and accommodation, a lot of doctors to deal with that huge population growth, teachers, you name it. So a lot of the same. And with that came out an education system that needed to care for that need. And you hear a lot about the Industrial Revolution, but what was the reason behind the Industrial Revolution? Why didn't the Industrial Revolution happen before that? It's because of the population. So a lot of people don't link it, by the way. Yeah. So what that has led to is an education system that focuses on one lifestyle, and that is the employee lifestyle. And what is an ideal employee? You probably say that better than I would. Is somebody that is committed, disciplined, don't make mistakes. And what happens when they make mistakes? They stress out. So they're stressed out. And this is why stress today is the most common disease. It's the disease of the century. Yeah? But then in entrepreneurship, one out of 10 companies survive 3 years. So what's the norm? It's failure. Yeah. So if your lifestyle is to deal with failure, that is your lifestyle. But then if we are to evolve an education system that actually can prepare for both lifestyles, what should it look like? And that's why it's so interesting to have this discussion with you here. We have talked about the perception of what has been graduated as to be a generation that still seeks employment as a lifestyle. I want to understand what's the expectation now, from the employer side of it. And if you could help me with the perception or expectations from the government agencies or the public sector in general, and the private sector when it comes to what do they seek. And then after that, if we can have a look at how the education system could prepare them better.
Yes. Yeah.
That would be lovely.
Yes.
So should we start with the public sector?
Yeah, with the public sector, right?
Yeah.
Look, the public sector, all right, the whole definition of Emiratization initially was a government initiative to help employ nationals. That is it, full stop, right? And then it evolved into employ and train nationals in the private sector. Now, my opinion and my view, and what I have been preaching, I would say preaching, whether it is through articles, blogs, videos, or conversations I have with government and private sector, is that definition needs to change. Somewhere there has to be the word value that needs to be put in. And I'll talk about value because a lot of employers I speak with tell me secretly, we're interested in value. We're not getting the value. Or there is a perception and a self-fulfilling prophecy that hiring nationals does not provide me value. Right? So that is a conversation employers have. Now, public sector expects more of the private sector employers from 20 companies that employ 20 employees and above to hire nationals to fulfill a quota, a yearly quota, comply with this quota. And the public sector expects the private sector to train these nationals and to retain them, right? Now, so that's the public sector expectation. Obviously, you have government initiatives. Regionally, you have government initiatives. Locally, here we'll focus about, since we're in the UAE, we'll talk about the UAE. You have the NAFIS program, for example, which was announced pretty much 3 years ago. and then you have the benefits and the penalties that NAFIS also brings to the table, Mohri, etc. Now, a lot of the initiatives, what has happened is an unintended consequence, and I talk about it in my podcast, is that the conversation about nationalization has shifted from how can I hire people who can bring value, how can I train and develop future leaders, into how can you as an organization comply with quotas.
Okay, but wouldn't one help the other? Frankly speaking, I see it as an excellent initiative vis-a-vis what has been there before. I mean, it's like really pushed a lot of people. It made it way more interesting. The question then becomes how to get value from them.
Exactly.
Okay.
By the way,
and what's your experience in that? That's the beautiful.
I'm a proponent of the quotas. I'm not against the quotas. I speak about it even, and people, the private sector are shocked about it. They don't like the whole idea of quotas, right? But my take is, tomorrow, if you remove the quotas, I don't see private sector companies, majority of private sector companies, voluntarily rush to hire nationals, frankly speaking. So
but then what could have been another solution? I mean,
I think the quota is a good stepping stone, right? But we don't want to get bogged in it, right? So the public sector's expectation is comply with the quota so that you can achieve those three things. You hire nationals, train them, and then you grow them, right? The initiatives or the interventions focus on the employment part and not very much on the two other parts, which is training and growth.
Okay.
They are, but not enough, right?
Okay.
So public sector thinks that way. Private sector, we can move into the private sector now. The private sector thinks, right, rather, instead of me hiring a Abdullah who has 7 years, 10 years of experience, who can become my data analyst, my manager in data analytics, I'd rather hire 2 Abdullahs or 3 fresh graduate Abdullahs so I can comply with my quotas.
Okay, so the interest is on the less costly, but then fill in the quotas.
Absolutely. I have conversations with multinationals, with private sector organization multinationals, about value, about going beyond that, about hiring the right. It is about what we want now is to comply with the quota.
Yeah, but isn't that, still interesting in the sense that you are dealing with newcomers to the market at least?
Absolutely. But what happens with the old comers? I'm not talking about us, right?
Yeah, but the old comers mostly are still in the government, are they?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Because think about it, right? We have 13, you would know the numbers, right? 13,000 university graduates every year, or what's the number now?
No, it's way more.
Way more, right?
Yeah,
So more than that, right? Yeah. The public sector wouldn't take a quarter of them because they don't have enough jobs. So we're talking about for the past 5 years, where have most of them been absorbed? So you do have, you have people in the market who are experienced and maybe not accounted for because they're experienced. They're beyond the fresh graduate category, right? And then you have the ones who are employed but not really happy in their jobs. And I'm not talking about not happy. I'm talking about underemployed. I'm talking about people who don't find their jobs fulfilling, that they are unhappy to the extent that they're looking for a way out.
So how can we make locals more interesting?
I think the onus is also on the private sector, right? The private sector needs to show first real, sincere intent in hiring nationals and growing them. There is a way of how they can show that. That's a communication exercise. That's a narrative building exercise. The private sector also has to back it up with real on the ground evidence that the nationals that they hire they mean business when it comes to growing them within the organization and giving them the platform to access regional and global opportunities. So if you look at...
Are you really suggesting an additional mechanism, probably like NAFIS?
Yes.
And like, okay, you'll be incentivized further if you can train and like progress the locals within the hierarchy, and with that you earn points or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And we're not
and have we
reinventing-
suggested that? And I would think that they would already be thinking about
Look,
it.
so
So probably another white paper.
maybe another white paper, and maybe
Okay, and I think, I think, they will be all ears open.
Absolutely.
And the beautiful thing is that with the latest changes, I think they share a common minister, in fact, now, which is for higher education and for,
It tells
which I
you
believe
something.
it's a smart move. I do believe it's a smart
and
move.
it tells you something, right?
There is something, and probably this is where my question is. And before getting into like entrepreneurship, and which is another subject I want to talk to you about, how do you think the education system could do a better job in shaping the characteristics of locals to be more appealing and ready for, let me choose the private sector?
Yes.
So what do you think the education system should do?
Wow, there's so much the education system can do. I'll tell you.
I understand that there's also society, which
Yes.
probably will need to be a wider kind of an education, and that could be a question on its own, which I'll come to. But let's talk about the education system first, and then I'll talk about how can we educate society, so that they are all welcoming and supportive of the private sector and being employed there.
I think there are two things the education system can do. If I boil it down, one thing, I'll talk about it later before I forget it, it's about communication and narrative building, right? I'll talk about that, right? But first, I think the education system needs to take off the hat of academia and looking at this whole process solely from an academic point of view into what is this product, which is the young local youth, and what is the life cycle? What happens to them after they graduate? And what happens to them 5, 6, 7 years later? Does it interest us or not? Unfortunately, a lot of the education system, a lot of education is interested in operating through the traditional academic model. Intake, go through the curriculum, outtake. And then it's not our problem. It's the employer's problem. And also it would be nice to have career days, employer career days, so that we show that we're really, committed with employers, and there are employers. We can show parents that there are employers here. It would be nice to also show internships. So I think the education system needs to start thinking more strategically. How can they create a transition, a model of transition? And they are there. I'm very impressed by some of the universities that have started touching on the fact of, right, we're going to not only focus on the education, but we're also going to look at how can we accelerate the transition of our graduates into the world of work. This can come through apprenticeship program, internship programs. It can come through partnership and collaboration over industry and academia projects, and so forth. So there are great examples from universities that do that. In schools, when we're looking at the education and school system, maybe there are few schools.
May I ask, what are the missing skills? Now, you see what comes out of the education system, and then you see what gets into the workforce, to the private sector.
So the key skills that need to be missing, look, we were focused, it's very funny, we were focused on a lot of 21st century, what we call 21st century smart skills, right? And
Excel sheet and...
No, Excel sheet is not, but we're talking about creativity, and we're talking about ability to be innovative, ability to deal with diversity, the ability of working under pressure, resilience, grit. When I speak to employers, I was very surprised this year, right? A lot of the employers, the need of the hour is the most basic skills that they expect from students. It's not that they're qualified, and it's not that they don't have the ability to be creative or their emotional and cultural quotient is high. It's the most basic, the ability to communicate properly. I'm speaking to a large, right? The ability of communicating verbally and even written communication.
Like basic skills.
Basics. Writing a proper email in a format a corporate professional environment will require. Not the way I would tweet, for example, instead of writing Y-O-U, or write a U, leave a smiley or an emoji, right? These are real stories, okay? The other is protocol and etiquette, right? Employers want young people to have the etiquette that will help them work with their peers in the corporate world, whether it's reporting how to manage your boss. Like,
so there is a cultural education that needs to exist.
Absolutely, there is a culture. There's one employer, I'll tell you a funny story.
So we need more global citizens, basically.
Absolutely. It's the most basic thing. It's the ability of understanding that the world is changing and organizations need to adapt. And there will be changes. Your position will change, and we might need to shift you and put you in another position. So understanding and accepting that and dealing with change, especially in an age of digital transformation and organization transformation, right? So
how about teamwork, for example?
Absolutely. Teamwork is another thing.
Is it a challenge?
It is a challenge.
And is that also cultural?
But it's more cultural rather than just teamwork.
Okay.
Right? It is more cultural.
So how can an education system deal with that?
Education system can deal with that by introducing programs beyond their curriculum that address needs.
The real life scenarios of our work environment.
So there has to be a communication between industry and academia that is very consistent, right?
I always wonder how realistic are at times the educational providers with real life. How touched are they with real life needs? And if you're telling me that those very basic skills are being missed out, and that they are focusing on subjects that are important, but are missing on equally important and if not more important subjects like just basic communication capabilities, teamwork, and etiquette.
Etiquette, self-motivation.
Okay.
That's a big thing. I get called to speak in organizations.
Wow.
On self-motivation. I prepare. When they call me in, I'm ready to go in with a proper workshop. And they say, no. We just want you to help them understand what is self-motivation.
Is there like a study on this? A paper that you are aware of?
Maybe a global paper, but not a local one.
I mean, I would. We should work on something like that. But this is the interesting thing about DisruptEd is that in every session we have, we realize that there needs to be a very important study and probably a white paper that needs to go to the authorities, and that could help them strategize better the different experiences necessary in the education system to prepare future generations for reality.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's another paper. I'll register that.
Yeah, okay. But one paper might be very interesting, Dr. Adil, is if you Google quiet quitting, which is a global phenomenon, right?
Quiet quitting. Wow.
Quiet quitting, right? And it's people who are employed but have decided within themselves they're no longer engaged with their job. This doesn't mean anything to me, this job. I'm not motivated to continue doing this.
Okay.
Right? That is the closest to, and the statistics there are shocking. They're shocking. They're talking about 70 to 80% of the workforce suffering from quiet quitting phenomenon, right? People who are not engaged. Here in the UAE, I think there is...
amongst a lot of my friends, the local ones, I hardly get anybody excited with their job.
I think the report was one in three in the UAE is engaged in their job.
Wow, that's big.
Yeah. You should
that's
look
big
up,
and sad.
You should look up a white paper from Cigna. Cigna writes about well-being and health. There's one that's very important, and it doesn't talk about local, but it talks about the general population and the fact of happiness is low in the workforce. So there are, but anything that is, again, if we take a step back, these are topics that we don't address when we talk about Emiratization, nationalization, because the focus is in bring numbers in, right?
But then this is natural evolution, yes? So once the
Absolutely.
numbers are in now,
Yeah.
now how do we make them
Now,
better?
how do we make them? How do we retain them? I think that's the next question.
Okay.
How do we retain? Because we
Okay.
have a problem with retention
Okay,
of
beautiful.
people.
I think you can add a lot of value and really enhance a lot of people's quality of life by addressing that question, which is how to retain them. And then probably knowing the authorities around here are highly interested in making sure that their quality of life is good and that they are retained. Probably, some kind of a feedback, okay? A bit of grounded feedback, properly researched, could really help them with some tools at least to make that happen. It's penalizing to not be employed, I have to say. I'll give you a few examples. Today, if I want to, although I run multiple businesses and I have, sufficient wealth, if I want to take a loan from a bank,
Yes.
it's a disaster. It's a nightmare.
They ask you for
I
a
actually
job.
put myself as an employee in some company
Yes.
just for the sake of them giving me a loan on a car or get a credit card, for God's sake. So that is definitely the case. And when it comes to setting up businesses, I appreciate that a lot of economic zones now make it cheaper. Some economic departments have started making that a bit more sensible. I appreciate that. But then that's not the biggest problem of problems. And funnily that you've mentioned this, I actually created 2 companies to try and help in that scene. One is called Global.net, and it's like a platform, it's a marketplace, whereby you would say, for example, I would like to establish a company. And then you'd post it as a project, and then agents come and say, we would like to help you with that, and economic zones, and we'll do it for that package in that timeline, and it will cost you so much. And then there is an escrow account whereby money is safe and people are not being fooled around. The same goes with tax advisory and stuff like that. And the reason why I thought that would be helpful is that you are in the dark. You don't know who can help you. Are they fooling you? Will they take your money and run away? And a lot of stress comes from that. Just figuring out who can help in the right way with the right price and with the right track record and feeling safe with your money and all. And the other company that I'm is now with the regulators is called KENS, and it's meant to be like a syndicate-led crowdfunding platform that is meant to help entrepreneurs fundraise, but using, with the help of seasoned investors. Okay? Because you do know, as entrepreneurs, it's impossible to get funding. And most people go for their father and mother money and friends, and I highly discourage that. Because you don't only you add a lot of stress on the individual, and at times he will lose a lot of relationships because in most cases those businesses fail, and that's the statistics of it. It's 200 years of statistics. 1 out of 10 survive 3 years.
And you don't want to be reminded, for decades by an uncle or a cousin, like, I lend you money.
Yeah.
And look what, you were useless. And,
you don't show up in majlises anymore.
Yes, you don't, right? And then it becomes something that's discussed generational, right? Your grandfather took money from me. You know how it works, right? But you know what with Global and KENS is in treasure in Arabic, right?
Yeah, it is treasure.
Yeah. So what you're offering is an ecosystem.
Yes, this is my hope.
Support ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
That is the key thing that even when we launch Majlis, right? Majlis draws inspiration from the Majlis. You come to a Majlis seeking advice, connection, and support, right? So what if we can bring people, partners together that can create that ecosystem for you across different... So what is missing is ecosystem. Today you have more entrepreneurs, right? You have more entrepreneurs, and I think it's because of mindset. You have the millennials and Gen Zs. Today, they want to be engaged. A job, whether it's government sector or private sector, is not engaging enough. Even if they have a job, you'll find them doing, other things. They're volunteering, they're involved in another company, they have a hobby. So today, the idea or the concept of entrepreneurship is more attractive. But how successful? And I always tell people, entrepreneurship is, entrepreneurship is really hard. It's not sexy. It's hard, right? It's not attractive in a way that it's cool. I'm an entrepreneur. It
But
is
how can it be?
soul-shattering hard. That's what I mean, right?
It is.
Yeah, so you have to have that grit and resilience and the extra self-motivation to really
So how can
really
we make
push
it
on.
easier for them? I mean, there are a lot of these programs there, and a lot of universities talk about it. Is it enough? And how can it be better?
I think two things: ecosystem and mentorship. Any form of mentorship. If you bring people who are seasoned, whether they're seasoned investors or seasoned board members, I think on-the-ground support is very crucial, right?
You know what I'm trying to do here at the school? I established a venture studio. And the idea is that I wanted to, first of all, educate the educators. So I always use this narrative, this example. Like, for example, if you go to university and you would like to study engineering, most probably the one that is teaching you is an engineer. If you want to be a physician, most probably a doctor will come and teach you. But why isn't it the case with business? The one that is teaching you is not a businessman or a woman.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
So that's a thing that I'm trying to change here at Citizens, is I want to move them from being teachers to mentors. And the only way to do that is to actually get them building businesses. Because you can always talk about entrepreneurship, very high level, but are you being realistic with how it works really in life?
So it's almost like train the trainer or
Exactly.
get the educators to actually build.
Exactly.
Yes.
The other thing that also, is something that I'm concerned with. Humanity likes to box things. Yeah. It's not true that we become of age at 18. Kids mature at different levels and times. Yeah, you'd find kids that are quite mature at 12 and 13, and some that never mature up ever.
Even at the age of 50.
It's different, yeah? So what I'm trying to do is to also get them into entrepreneurship and building businesses quite as early as we can get them. This is why we have an entrepreneurship curriculum that starts at age 4. Like age 4. So we start building that in them. And my hope is that by year 8, I involve as many as I can in actual business building. Because I think I don't want to be restricted by what humanity has decided as to be, you have to be 21 years old before you get into business. I don't understand where did that come from. You understand me? And adding to that, I want to involve parents. Because if society is the main hindrance, is their perception of how wise you are, the one important thing is to actually involve them in the process. How can we help them further be more ready for entrepreneurship, and what could be added to the ecosystem to actually give them the push?
I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking, and maybe it's food for thought for you. Why not add an extra layer? Why does entrepreneurship always have to be, when we train people and teach them entrepreneurship, it has to be about, right, you have to show that you're building a business and a startup, and you have to make it a success. Why can't entrepreneurship be a journey the same way that leadership is, right? We talk about leadership being a journey. Why can't we promote the fact that entrepreneurship, within this journey, there's a lot of personal traits, a lot of realizations, a lot of skills that any human being can develop that can be useful for them, whether it's in life or whether it's in employment. Today in employment, the concept of intrapreneurship is not very prevalent here in the country or in the region, right? These are the internal change agents, right, who can build ventures within the organization, right? So I think that will make it more interesting for educators, parents, and people to say, I want to learn entrepreneurship, not because at one point of time I have to create a business and I have to take a risk and I have to find funding or whatever. I think it has to be a journey. It has to be a course or a program.
You're saying it. Actually, I would challenge that.
Go ahead. I'd welcome it, yeah.
And that's actually a heavy discussion I had yesterday with my team. So what I see is that a lot of people look at entrepreneurship as to be a thing. Like read a book about entrepreneurship or go into a program about entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship? In my opinion, entrepreneurship is a lifestyle of how to handle risk.
Yes, it's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle. There's no skill that you need, that you would acquire that wouldn't fall under entrepreneurship. Do an entrepreneur need to be resilient? Yes. Does that entrepreneur needs to know math? Yes. Everything is a yes. The entrepreneurship is only how can I handle risk? That's the main difference. Am I trained? Am I used to dealing with risk in a way whereby I find my success amongst failures? The way I try to handle this as a process, so I want to be like training people onto that lifestyle, not a skill. It's not a skill. Entrepreneurship is not a skill. It's not a set of knowledge. It's a lifestyle. It's how you behave in dealing with risks. How am I trying to do that? Is to deal with it statistically. So if 1 out of 10 succeed, 9 fails, there are business models that enhances the statistics. For example, venture studios. Venture studios is about building one team that multi-ventures, makes multiple ventures at a time. Their statistics are a bit better. So 1 out of 3 survives 3 years. Meaning that one team has to build 3 to 4 companies at the same time. And statistics say that most probably at least one will survive. And by doing that, because within the context of a team, each member has a lot of value, and each member usually leads on one of those ideas. So you are multi-skilling. I am the head of marketing for this idea, but then I am the head of operations for that idea, and I'm the finance guy for this idea, and I'm the CEO of that idea, okay? And with that, I am multi-skilling, because at the end of the day, it's about managing a team and knowing the value of each member of the team. This is not something that we get trained to do. Usually in college, you probably have been, I've been that guy. It's like, I have a team, but I do everything. You understand me? Or somebody does everything. Everybody is like piggybacking on that. You understand? That one individual that is really good in what he does. But within the context of a venture studio and the team that multitasks, there can't be the one that does everything. Everybody has to do their job and has to gain that skill. And has to gain that skill not theoretically, it's practical. When are you psychologically molded? It's in the earlier years of your life. It's at school. You understand me? So we need to psychologically mold future generation earlier on that choice of a lifestyle. And we need to train them accordingly. When I ask, Adil, what is it that you would love to see coming out of the school? I always say I would love to see entrepreneurial teams that know how to multi-venture. And the other thing I would love to see are individuals that know how to gauge their quality of life, enhance it for themselves and others. That's what I would like to see out of the school.
So Dr. Adil, on that point, so you have what you described now, you've identified within yourself the shape of the character of a citizen schools graduate.
Yeah, so this is what I hope to produce. And what do you think we should do for the locals?
So you've identified that. My question is, and here's where I say, I think entrepreneurship holds the key as a lifelong skill or journey, right? The UAE, let's talk about Dubai specifically, since we're here in Dubai, right? Dubai is an entrepreneurial venture.
It is. It's a
Right.
country that's run as a company, and I love that.
Yeah.
And we've been in the engine for some time and contributed to it. Yes.
Absolutely, right? Very little resource, took a risk, adapts and evolves fast, and we've seen that, right? So Dubai is an entrepreneurial venture. And what makes sense when decision makers are thinking right at the top, what is the shape of people we want to graduate from our country that we want to produce, whether they're expat or locals, and specifically locals here? What do we want them to have? What is the set of characteristics do we want from them? I always give this example. If I'm a multinational organization and I'm going to Japan, I set up in Japan, right? I know exactly what to expect if I'm hiring Japanese. The perception and the narrative building, the storyline is there, right? It's there. We already know. It doesn't make sense if I'm a multinational and I go to Japan and I'm looking for an IT team and start thinking, where can I find an IT team? Maybe I should hire from Singapore or India or Pakistan. Right? It doesn't make sense because the thinking is, or the understanding, you're in Japan and the shape of the talent, the Japanese talent, is globally known and they're available, right?
Yeah.
Germany, the same thing, right? What is the character of the Emirati talent?
You know,
what
that's
do
a
they do?
title for a research or a white paper on its own.
So how many we have 5 white papers now?
The Emirati
5 white
employees.
papers now we have.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We have like,
So
I
great.
should keep a list. The team will keep a list. But
Yeah.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
So for me, what makes sense, right? I really feel personally about this, right? What makes sense to me, not only because Dubai, I'm talking about Dubai, and we were talking about UAE, but Dubai is a great case study and example we know as an entrepreneurial venture. What type of, why can't we focus on developing people with entrepreneurial mindset first, rather than, whether they have doctors, right? Because even in healthcare, today with the fourth industrial revolution, we're looking at people who will reimagine healthcare and redefine, right? In any sector. The second thing, which I feel very, very strongly about, is entrepreneurship is the one set of skill and discipline the public sector needs, all right? The civil servants require. And because that will help them understand their main clientele. Who's the main clientele in our country? It's really the foreign direct investment and the foreign companies and multinationals. These are private sector organizations, entrepreneurial by background, right? And if I'm public sector, I need to be able to not only understand them, but also have a feel of what is it like for me to be a company that's decided to shift from London to Dubai. What does it feel like? What am I worried about? What do I want to move fast in terms of transaction processes? I feel there's a disconnect because I'm being hard on public sector, I'm sorry, but because the public sector, and as great as the public sector we have, and we have one.
We have the best, actually.
And we have the best public sector.
And
The private sector is playing catch up. But there is a disconnect in mindset from people, with the multinational private sector. And if we bring it a full circle back, remember the thing I mentioned to you initially, the question of value. The private sector keeps talking about value, and the public sector keeps talking about numbers and compliance. And this is where both don't meet.
You really hit me with this whole Emirati characterization vision. If I would imagine 3 or 4 characteristics that I would love to see, not only amongst Emiratis, globally, but probably since we are Emiratis, I think this should be our priority. I would love to see Emiratis that know how to team up, create entrepreneurial teams, that multi-venture. That's in their characteristic. They know how to deal with that, and hence know how to deal with stress. Yes. And know how to deal with problem solving from a grounded position through research. I would love to see that. I would love to see that Emiratis know how to care for their health and wellness. So they are educated as basic knowledge on how to stay fit and stay healthy and how to continue to evolve their health and well-being. So they're solid mentally and solid physically. I would love to see Emiratis knowing how to gauge their quality of life scientifically and enhance it for themselves and others using science, yeah? And I would love to see Emiratis knowing how to wealth manage.
Very important.
Very basic knowledge.
Yes.
I don't know why it's not in schools, and not even in universities, because all of us have at some stage, some disposable income. But do we know how to deal with it and grow it in a healthy way, in a balanced way, so that it adds to our quality of life? I would love to imagine Emiratis having these and are known for it. Wow, that would be something. That would be like, and it's all doable. It is doable, in my opinion. I understand it's easily said than done, but is it impossible? I don't think it is impossible. But start at school, though.
It does start at school.
And starts with families. And probably this is one question that I need you to help me with.
Yeah.
Is how do we educate the mass? How do we educate the families in order to arrive to, helping a generation come out that has character?
That's probably the most difficult question of the episode.
That's my job.
Look, with families, I think here in the local culture, we're significantly influenced by success stories and role models, right? So I think a focus on role models and success stories is one way to get people interested. Oh, so Dr. Adil is a senior director at XYZ Hotel, for example, right? Who is he? Where did he come from? What was his journey? That whole communication piece and narrative is not there. We're not communicating enough the people, these successes, right? The second thing is there has to be more effort and initiative from schools. Remember, schools, they still hold Parents' Day, right? What kind of conversations happen there when schools invite parents, right? Is it only about the educational performance, or is it about how the world is changing and what you need to do to prepare your young ones for the world that is changing? Because the assumption is parents know. They must be reading the newspaper, watching the news. So schools, universities should also take up some initiatives like that. I can think of those two, but I think the last thing is we should let nature take its course. I always say that, right? Nature take its course is now, when you're a parent and you understand better, you know better, right? So obviously that generational change and shift plays a role. So I think that is some of the things that we can do, from with parents.
I would love to know what are you majorly busy with nowadays. I'd like to hear about Majlis. You invited me once to Majlis, but I really don't fully understand. Would you explain that? What is that?
Yeah. It's and it's taking shape. It's a newly launched. We call it community-powered leadership platform, and the Majlis is, which is MYJLIS, is inspired by the old tradition of majlises. Right, and honestly, I've always been criticized. I'm an introvert by nature.
Like
right?
me.
Yeah.
All of us are.
So I just want to get the work done. I want to do this. I want to work. I'm not very social, honestly, right? And in our culture, being in majlises.
I mean, headhunting, not social, that would be a tough game, okay?
Yeah, people don't know that, right? They think I'm an extrovert, but
It's a skill.
It's a skill, yeah. I wear
always
both
say the
hats,
same, yeah.
right? So the extrovertism, the headhunting is my cape, but I'm really actually an introvert. So I've always been criticized. You don't go to enough majlises, right, to socialize. Why? Why do I have to go to majlises? Well, that's where you develop networks, right?
The business opportunities.
Business opportunities, and that's where you gain
I get
support.
a lot of that too.
Right?
Yeah.
So really, I said...
But I love my cats.
You like your piece, right? So as entrepreneurs, unfortunately, you have to work with what you have, right? And I thought, right, why don't I create my own mail list?
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
And why don't we invite people? And why don't we open it up not only to locals,
all the introverts.
introverts and extroverts. People watching this, it's open to everyone, right? So why don't we open it up? So Mailist is a community power platform where we have a group of locals who act as guides in there and expats as well. So we call this the steering committee. And it's inspired by the traditional majlis where you go. And in a majlis, what are people looking at? They're looking to learn, connect, and grow. There is an unwritten or unofficial commitment between people of the same majlis to support each other. So if you're attending my majlis and you're looking for support, I'm looking for, does anyone know someone in XY organization I can connect you with? And this is the word wasta comes from, right? So beyond the negative connotation of wasta is actually a cultural tool that is used between a society that is collectivist. Our society is a collectivist society in the language of culture intelligence, right? It's a society that thrives on relationships. So the Mailist platform, we launched a number of events, and these events were very sector specific. The idea is not the event. The idea is to invite people who are looking to access the market, looking to grow their business, and looking to access local guides. And local guides don't necessarily have to be Emirati, although we have Emiratis, but also people who are experts and specialists in their field, and they are available to support organizations. So that is the platform. The big, hairy, audacious goal for me is not only organize events and support businesses, but to grow us to a community of 100 strong members for now, because it's small community, and to have a community platform online. So everything that you can do in a majlis offline, you can do it online. That is where we're headed to.
Now connect with you.
If people want to connect with me, the best way to connect with me is my personal website, talibbinhashim.com. You can reach me there. On Instagram, please connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram numbers are really, when I look at them, they make me sad. So the real Talib. Yeah, I'm trying.
The real Talib, huh? Okay,
yeah,
nice.
the real Talib. There's no other Talib.
Okay.
The real Talib. You can reach me on the real Talib. You can check out Mailist, which is myjlis.com. You can check us out there.
When am I
or Google.
getting invited there?
When, inshallah, we organize the next event, maybe we can organize an event together. Let's see, inshallah.
Would love that.
Absolutely, but we'll be more than happy to have you. Not only be invited, but also to speak. I mean, there's so much that I've taken as jewels from this conversation. And the conversation, a lot of food for thought. And I think a lot of people also would find value from hearing from you, and hearing your thoughts.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, buddy.